21 years ago, Leslie Prier was found dead inside of her home.
It's innocent until proven guilty, right?
You would just expect for someone to have seen or heard something.
This is all very bewildering, very strange.
There's no tears coming out of your face.
He didn't seem weird, and how you can look somebody in the eye and knowing that you committed this crime and act like nothing happened is pretty unreal.
May 2nd, 2001. Just another beautiful spring morning on Drummond Avenue, a quiet tree-lined road in the affluent suburb of Chevy Chase, Maryland. Students set off for their Wednesday classes, while commuters poured their coffee and joined the morning rush, their thoughts focused on meetings, emails and errands. Life for the high-flying professionals who lived there was busy, but it was also comfortable, predictable, and above all, safe. The idea of something dark, something violent, unfolding just a few doors down? Unthinkable. But behind the door of one red brick home on the street, that illusion of security had already been crushed. 4 miles away, alarm bells were sounding at Specialities Inc., a DC-based ad firm. One of the company's most diligent account executives, 49-year-old Leslie Prier, still hadn't shown up for work. She was due to clock in at 10 a.m. It had just turned 10:30. To most, that might not sound dramatic, but to those who knew Leslie, it was a red flag. She was reliable, predictable, the type who never left people guessing. Yet she hadn't called to say that she was sick, hadn't sent a text about traffic, and now wasn't answering her phone. Her boss, Brett Reedy, took that silence as cause for concern. He contacted Leslie's immediate family members to check that everything was all right. Her daughter, Lauren Prier, was away at university at the time and wasn't sure where her mum was. Leslie's husband, Carl Prier, who went by the nickname Sandy, had last seen her at 7:45 a.m. when he headed off for work. Worried that nobody could reach her, he left his office and went straight home. By late morning, Brett was standing outside 4824 Drummond Avenue. His knocks went ignored, and he saw no movement through the windows. Sandy arrived shortly thereafter, at 11:35 a.m., house key in hand. But he didn't need it. The front door was already unlocked. Together, the two men stepped into a nightmare. The front hallway was streaked with blood. There were spatters and smears on the walls, and a red pool had congealed by the entrance. A nearby table was overturned. A rug had been dragged from the foyer into the living room. Upon seeing this disarray, Brett dialed 911 while Sandy frantically searched for Leslie. He found the family dog shut in the basement, but no sign of his wife anywhere. While Brett talked with dispatchers, Sandy began phoning the local hospitals. That's when the two men were instructed by emergency services to leave the house and wait for assistance. They grabbed the pooch and did so on the lawn. Montgomery County officers arrived at 11:47 a.m. Upstairs, in the master bathroom, they made a grim discovery. A pair of legs were protruding from the shower. Inside the stall, they found Leslie's lifeless body, lying face down in a shallow puddle of water. News spread fast and sent shockwaves through the community. Chevy Chase was a notably low-crime suburb, one of the most affluent in the entire country, and the victim was a warm person from a tight-knit family. Could this have simply been an accident? The result of a trip in the hallway that finished Leslie off while she cleaned up in the shower? Authorities decided to wait 2 days for post-mortem results before jumping to conclusions. Autopsy findings revealed 7 lacerations on Leslie's head, consistent with being struck against a hard surface. There were multiple bruises on her torso and hemorrhaging around her neck area. This was no accident. Leslie had been strangled, and her head battered onto the foyer floor and the sharp edge of the shoe molding by the front door, hence the mess in the entrance. She had then been dragged upstairs into the shower and washed, an apparent attempt by the killer to destroy evidence, control bleeding, and perhaps stage an accidental fall. A forensic reagent revealed hidden evidence of a half-hearted cleanup attempt. Large areas in the foyer where blood had pooled and been wiped or dabbed away. Distinct swipe patterns were visible on the door and floor leading toward the staircase. The same forensic process revealed additional residue around the kitchen and the downstairs bathroom sinks. Dark red spots and smears were flagged throughout the kitchen, along door frames, on the trash can, and the back door which led to the garden. Crucially, not all of it belonged to Leslie. According to the Cellmark Diagnostics Lab, 3 blood samples at the scene, a droplet under the dining room window baseboard, another in the kitchen doorway, and a smear on the interior side of the kitchen door leading to the backyard, belonged to a single, unidentified male. Leslie had clearly fought back. Under her fingernails, the lab recovered traces of DNA that matched the unknown man's profile. Whoever had done this hadn't gotten away clean, but he had gotten away, and he had done so in a hurry. No official timeline has ever been released for this case, but here's what we do know. On the morning of May 2nd, only 2 people were inside 4824 Drummond Avenue: Leslie and Sandy. As mentioned, Sandy left for work at 7:45 am. Leslie planned to leave at around 9 am as per usual to catch a bus to her office on Wisconsin Avenue. The culprit must have struck during that hour and 15-minute window when she was alone. With May 2nd being a weekday, he'd then have plenty of time to bleach the scene uninterrupted. What he didn't count on was how quickly Leslie's absence would raise alarms. Brad and Sandy entered the home at roughly 11:35 am. That means the intruder only had between 2 hours 35 minutes and 3 hours 50 minutes to gain access, commit the slaying, stage the scene, and scrub away every trace of DNA. That's not much time. It's entirely possible then that Brett and Sandy's sudden arrival forced the killer to flee partway through his cleanup. Maybe he heard them outside, freaked out, and tried to escape through the dining room window, leaving behind a droplet of blood on the baseboard. When that didn't work, maybe he rushed into the kitchen, leaving another drop in the doorway, and then finally exited through the back door, smearing more on the handle as he left. That's a lot of mights and maybes, but it would explain why the perp foolishly left traces of his own blood behind for experts to analyse. Unfortunately, the suspect's DNA didn't match with any samples in CODIS, the national DNA database, and so detectives vetted everyone close to Leslie. Her husband Sandy was of course first under the microscope. His daughter Lauren defended him staunchly. She knew her parents' relationship was solid, and that her father wasn't responsible. A DNA comparison proved her right, and Sandy was ruled out quickly. Yet suspicion lingered. Further DNA samples were collected from everyone with close ties to Leslie, but none were a match. While investigators did examine other homicides in the broader Montgomery County area, they determined this to be an isolated incident. This left the MCPD scratching their heads. There was no obvious motive, and none of the neighbours had seen or heard anything out of the ordinary that morning. Without leads, the case froze over. Lauren stayed in contact with the authorities, but years passed without any new developments. Sadly, Sandy passed away in 2017, never knowing who killed his wife, never fully clearing his name of suspicion. But the Montgomery County Cold Case Unit didn't let go, and with each year that went by, technology improved. Specifically, in 2018, there was a massive breakthrough in forensic science: genetic genealogy, a revolutionary method that uses DNA from crime scenes to track down suspects via their distant relatives. The technique has since been used to solve over 500 cold cases and has brought some of America's most elusive monsters, like Gary Hartman, William Earl Talbot II, and Joseph James D'Angelo, out from the shadows and into jail cells. But the question on Montgomery County PD's mind was, could genetic genealogy help identify Leslie Prior's killer too? In September 2022, cold case investigators submitted the preserved DNA found under Leslie's fingernails to Othram Inc. There, they conducted forensic-grade genome sequencing, the first time the technique had been used in Maryland state history. After analysing the samples, the lab identified shared markers to an individual living in Romania. This person was one of the killer's distant relatives, one they'd probably never met, one who had innocently submitted their DNA to a commercial genetic database in order to research their ancestry, one who had unwittingly cracked this case wide open. Working backwards, detectives were able to draw up a family tree, and after 2 years of building branches, they honed in on one name in particular. A man living in the United States. Eugene Gligor. He was an ex-boyfriend of Leslie's daughter, Lauren, but hadn't been considered a suspect as the two had lost contact years before the murder. In chatting with Lauren, investigators learned more about her past with Eugene. They had met when she was 15, were high school sweethearts, lived just 10 minutes apart, and frequently visited one another. To Lauren, he was outgoing, charming, handsome. Her mother Leslie had welcomed him into their lives. Her father Sandy, on the other hand, had always thought there was something off with the boy. During their courtship, Eugene never once displayed signs of violence towards Lauren. However, as he got older, he began to exhibit delinquent behavior and was arrested on charges of weapons possession and a DUI. Despite coming from a wealthy background himself, additional incident reports listed him as a suspect in multiple residential thefts in the local area, and he even matched the description of a boy who had assaulted a woman near Bethesda Chevy Chase High School. Lauren personally defended Eugene against that last suspicion, telling the police that he was both harmless and innocent. In the end, no charges were filed against him, and he was never swabbed. Lauren and Eugene broke up when they enrolled at different universities. The split had been amicable, and they both moved on to different partners. They didn't stay in direct contact, but occasionally bumped into one another when they attended events hosted by mutual friends. There was never any tension when they did. Eugene was 21 years old at the time of Leslie's slaying. He and his mother relocated to Washington, D.C. a few months after. Friends, both new and old, sometimes asked him about who he thought killed Mrs. Prier. With a steady gaze and a calm tone of voice, he'd always reply in the same manner. "Your guess is as good as mine." The cold case unit began looking through their extensive evidence file, and while doing so, they couldn't believe what they found. Eugene Gligor's name had actually come up during the initial search for clues, and not just from Sandy, whose suspicions fell on deaf ears. In January 2002, a tip came in from one of Eugene's old neighbours in Kenwood, who had told investigators they suspected he may have been connected to Leslie Prier's death. The tipster noted that the police had frequently visited the Gligor household in the past for issues like noise complaints, underage drinking, and marijuana usage. After talking with this neighbour, the original investigators still didn't consider Eugene a suspect. Though a mischievous youth, he had seemingly straightened himself out at college, had stayed out of trouble, hadn't stayed in contact with the Priers, and in their eyes, had no conceivable motive. He wasn't asked to submit a sample of his DNA, wasn't so much as questioned. In hindsight, it was a missed opportunity, but more diligent officers had since taken over the investigation. They identified Eugene Gligor living in the U Street corridor, a trendy nightlife district in Washington, D.C. There, he worked as an account executive for a firm specializing in surveillance equipment. Ironically, Eugene was now the one being watched. But before officers could act, they needed a DNA sample to compare with the matter found under Leslie's nails. So, they staged a covert operation. On June 9th, 2024, Eugene landed at Dulles International Airport after returning from a trip to Europe. Under the guise of a routine secondary screening, a US customs officer led him into a room where several plastic water bottles had been placed on a table. Eugene took the bait, grabbing one of the bottles and drinking its contents. Detectives watched through surveillance monitors as Eugene left his mock screening, discarded the bottle in the trash, and went on his merry way. Agents collected the bottle shortly thereafter and sent it in for testing. The lab results were irrefutable. The DNA found on the bottle matched the crime scene profile. The person Leslie had scratched while fighting for her life, the person whose flesh was under her nails, was most certainly Eugene Gligor. And so it was that one piece of trash had just helped to apprehend another. On June 18th, 2024, a US Marshal Task Force apprehended Eugene Gligor outside his DC apartment. He was sipping coffee and scrolling on his phone as they approached him. From there, he was taken to the station for interrogation. What followed was a 24-minute confrontation. Detectives Augustin and Dupuy entered the room. After advising Eugene of his rights, they began.
How well did you know Lauren's mom? Like, was there ever any kind of a weird relationship between you two after Lauren?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I wasn't in touch, so I don't...
Okay. So you were never, like, dating Lauren's mom or anything like that, behind the scenes?
No.
Okay.
I wasn't ever in touch, that...
Okay. So from the crime scene, we have DNA from the person who was there when Leslie died. So there's Leslie's blood all over the place, obviously, but then there's also another DNA profile that was picked up from the crime scene. So we realized that they never talked to you, never did anything, and we wanted to find out more about you. And if there was any kind of situation where you could have been at the house at that time.
I'm a little confused. So to find out more and talk to me, why not just call me and ask me to come in and talk to me versus have marshals come and arrest me and bring me in? I'm just confused as to why that's the case.
Well, because we needed to talk to you in a controlled environment, and because there's a little bit more to it than what we've told you so far.
Could you tell me?
Well, we're getting there. I'm trying to give you an opportunity to be a little bit forthcoming before we...
I mean, I feel a little bit trapped here, like...
Well, you're under arrest, so you should feel trapped. Okay?
Right, and so I think, I mean, probably asking for a lawyer is my best course of action at this point.
That's totally fine. And we don't have to ask you any more questions, but we are going to just tell you some stuff. Okay? So from the crime scene, the DNA that was taken, we actually have a sample of your DNA, and it was compared to the crime scene DNA, and it matched. So we know that you were there at the time when Leslie died.
But I never gave a sample of DNA.
That's correct. We obtained a sample from a discarded water bottle that you drank out of. So you were followed, and we collected it after you discarded it into the trash, and it was swabbed, and it was compared. So your DNA matches the crime scene DNA.
I don't know what to say. I have no recollection. I have no memory. I don't know what to say.
Okay, well, that's why we wanted to talk to you, to find out if there's any other explanation. But we can't ask you any more questions if you want a lawyer present.
Yeah, I think I should have a lawyer present. I don't know what to do or say. It doesn't make sense to me, so I don't know. I don't know what to do.
Do you have a lawyer that you...
No.
Okay.
I don't have to call. I don't know. I'd probably call my girlfriend and ask her to help Fox. I don't know.
Okay, that's fine. We're not going to ask you any more questions. There's no tears coming out of your face.
I'm very dry right now.
You're dry?
I'm very dry. I'm parched. I'm dehydrated. You can probably see my eyes are bloodshot red because I'm just tired and drained. I don't know what's going on. You want me to drink water so I can tear? Like, what is wrong with you?
I don't want you to tear. I just don't want you to...
What are you trying to say?
I'm just trying to say that this seems a little put on.
Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
No.
Oh my God, you're so full of it. You're after. This is the police. This is, yes, like it makes sense. It's, in your eyes, it's guilty until proven innocent. I get it.
Well, honey, your DNA was in the crime scene. That's why, like, there's a reason.
There's due process, right? Sure. Due process. So you're saying I'm guilty before I've even been put into a court of law?
I'm saying that there's probable cause to believe that you were there when
I think what you were saying was the contrary to that. So, okay. But I don't remember. I don't know. No, I don't know.
What we're trying to figure out is how your blood was at the scene that day.
I don't know. I don't have any recollection of being involved with any of this.
You keep saying you don't remember and you don't have any recollection.
Well,
but if somebody was not involved, it would be an adamant, I didn't do
I didn't do it. I definitely didn't do it. Like, this is absolutely, this is, you know.
I don't know why your blood is there also. I don't know.
Wow.
The only person that knows is Leslie, and she can't tell us.
Wow. I can't believe it.
It was clear Eugene was putting on an act, playing for more time, as if getting away with murder for nearly a quarter of a century wasn't enough. Thankfully, he wasn't fooling anyone, and was subsequently charged with first degree. His friends and neighbours were shocked. In their words, Eugene was a zen, happy, and positive person, focused on personal growth. He was community-driven. He gave generously to charity. A former co-worker said he couldn't imagine Eugene hurting a fly. Others, though, saw through his charade. One colleague stated that although he appeared receptive and warm at first, when challenged, Eugene could be a, quote, giant, condescending prick. One of his 2 ex-wives accused him of being aggressive, throwing things and punching walls during arguments. His own brother had expressed fear that Eugene might one day hurt him. Even so, nobody suspected his dark secret, especially not Lauren. In her words, she never imagined the person that she had once dated, the gentle young man who had once sat around her family's table, whom she had once cared for and defended, would one day be responsible for such a grievous betrayal. When she had first told Eugene about her mother's death, he had embraced her and convincingly said, "I'm so sorry." When she ran into him again at a restaurant shortly before his arrest, he appeared calm and collected. "He didn't seem weird," Lauren recalled. "And how you can look at someone in the eye, knowing that you committed this crime, and act like nothing happened, is pretty unreal." Clearly, Mr. Gligor's act wasn't just for his interrogators. He had convinced almost everyone in his social circle that he was a mild-mannered man, leaving them to grapple with the reality of his actions. Could their charming, helpful, longtime friend also be a cold-hearted monster? By his own admission, yes. In May 2025, Eugene Gligor, now 45 years old, pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of second degree, meaning he admits to taking Leslie's life, but that his actions weren't premeditated. He's now facing up to 30 years in prison. State's Attorney John McCarthy remarked, "It doesn't bring Leslie back, but now they know who did it to her. There's no such thing as closure, but I'm proud of what we do together, and I'm proud of our continuing search to find creative ways to make people in this community safer." The last question on most of your minds is likely this: why? What exactly compelled Eugene to enter the Priya family's home and so callously take the life of a woman who had been nothing but nice to him? A woman who had cooked him meals, who had taken him on trips to the beach, who had played board games with him. A woman who he hadn't seen in at least 2 years. Some have speculated that he was motivated by lust, anger, or simple murderous curiosity. Indeed, given that there was no sign of a forced entry, it's possible Eugene simply knocked on the door, and Leslie, recognizing a friendly face from the past, led him inside. But if this had been a premeditated homicide, Eugene had been extremely inept. He hadn't brought a weapon, needed to brutally finish Leslie off with his own hands, and had sustained a wound in the process. In the state attorney's words, the circumstances suggest that this was more likely a spur-of-the-moment thing. As mentioned, Eugene had been a suspect in a string of burglaries during his teenage years. I can't help but wonder whether this was another break-in gone wrong. He knew the layout of the house, knew where the valuables were kept. What he didn't know was that he would come face to face with Leslie. A woman who knew his name, his address. A woman who, from everything I've read, would almost certainly have helped him mend his ways had he only stopped there. But as his ex-wife attested, when backed into a corner, Eugene had both a temper and a tendency to lash out. Perhaps when he encountered Leslie, he panicked, and his aggressive side reared its ugly head. Then, instead of stealing anything, he focused on covering his tracks as best he could. That's all speculative on my part. Ultimately, the only person who knows why Leslie died is Eugene, and he has yet to give an explanation. Not to the police, not to the Bray family, not to the court. After 24 years, that question of motive remains unanswered. But hopefully, not for much longer. Eugene's sentencing hearing is scheduled for August 28th, 2025. That's the day that Lauren and the rest of her family hope to hear something, anything, about why. A huge thank you to my supporters here on YouTube and over on Patreon, especially my biggest supporters: Holly Lyons, Thomas Almond, Alana Pons, Asiamina, Alicia 1996 V, Azrael Warakai, Aðalsteinn Traustason, Colin Monsma, Connor Louthan, Emzetz, Farewelltattoosjaxfl, George Lopez, Gina Valera, Gracearchie, Hamish, John Stewart Muller, Lucy Kushinada, Michelle F. Granfield, Mistyblue Longie, Orlando Torres, Peter Lolgerich, Sviso Skivcool, TNS Mum, Terry Ford, and Giokai. Thank you guys so much for your continued support. Remember to hit that like button, and I'll see you all again very soon.